I've been recently looking into the 17 goals set out in Agenda 2030. Now, I've read them many times, and each time I pick up something else. And this time I couldn't help but think how handy COVID is in helping these goals be fulfilled. Each goal works towards building a fairer, more equal world where we all have the same chances, such as access to the same levels of education, infrastructure and healthcare. And as I was looking into ways this utopia, and if you've read Thomas More's Utopia, you'll know how that will pan out, how this could be achieved, I noticed that one foundation in particular stands to benefit the most from this pandemic and the rebuild afterwards, and that's the Rockefeller Foundation. What I'm going to read to you now is straight from the Rockefeller Foundation website, and it's about life before and after COVID. Talk of life before COVID, but that life wasn't fair, nor was it sustainable, either economically or environmentally. So we have a choice. The world can pursue a recovery that favours the wealthy, runs on fuel that triggers environmental calamity, and holds back women and girls. That path would result in an inequitable, unsustainable future that fails humanity, one ravaged by war, environmental degradation and pandemics. Or the world can choose a future where everyone has the opportunity to realise their full potential and climate disaster is avoided. In that future, humanity's power would be unleashed, making us all richer, safer and healthier, and the planet would be saved. As you'll see by the end, there will be one person, one foundation, or maybe two, that is definitely going to be richer, and that's going to be Rockefeller and Gates Foundation. It then goes on to say that prior to the pandemic, half the world's population lacked access to essential health facilities, and more than 800 million people worldwide lacked access to electricity. Billions more have their potential diminished by unreliable or insufficient energy access, predominantly provided by carbon-emitting fuels. Already you can see that they're using COVID-19 as a point in time. Life before COVID wasn't good, it was full of inequalities, but life after COVID has this great, wonderful potential for global equality. In the next paragraph, we see the Rockefeller Foundation get right down to the nitty-gritty of what they want to do and how they want to do it. It says, we will ensure the most vulnerable people and communities get access to science-based tests, tools and data to fight the coronavirus pandemic and prevent future outbreaks. Right now, the pandemic's impact has been inequitable. Too many with too little don't have access to what they need to fight the disease. We'll work to equitably distribute COVID-19 testing, tracing and vaccination solutions to reach communities and people most in need, and drive a robust pandemic response around the world with a broad range of public health response tools. This article was written at the end of October 2020, but as you can see from the clip above, they'd already made a $15 million investment in COVID testing kits in April. And of course there's ID 2020. Now this is in partnership with iRespond, which in turn is in partnership with the CDC and the World Health Organization and Microsoft, and there are others as well. But this program will offer a digital identity platform to approximately 35,000 externally displaced residents of the Mae La Camp in Thailand. Through their digital identities, participants will be able to not only access improved healthcare services, but also securely store educational and professional credentials. Almost as soon as this pandemic broke out, we were told that a possible way out of this was to get a digital identity. The original plan was to have this rolled out across the world by 2030, but I suspect the pandemic has helped this along its way and we're going to see it much sooner. COVID-19 has also given something else a little helping hand, and that's Trust Stamp. This is a biometrical digital identity platform, and I quote, evolves just as you evolve. And the idea is to introduce it into the remote communities in West Africa, and it's a collaboration between Bill Gates and Gavi and also MasterCard, but I'll tell you about that in a sec. This program was first launched in 2018. and the Trust Stamps digital identity platform will be integrated into the Gavi MasterCard, the Wellness Pass. You've probably already heard of that. And that's a digital vaccination record and identity system, and it's linked also to MasterCard's Click to Pay system, and it's powered by its AI and machine learning technology called New Data. I found this fascinating little article. It was written in August, just gone, 2020, from someone in, I assume it's a journalist, in Zambia. And they've already got the wellness pass, and I'll just read you a couple of paragraphs of what they say. It says, in an effort to efficiently deliver vaccines to millions of children, tracking identity and immunisation records in a digitised manner, and incentivising the delivery of vaccines, Gavi is one of the global firms spearheading the development of the COVID-19 vaccine, initially entered into a public-private partnership with MasterCard in 2018. In order to deploy the MasterCard Wellness Pass for interested Gavi-eligible countries. With the world currently ravaged by a COVID-19 pandemic, Gavi announced last June that MasterCard's Wellness Pass program had the potential to be adapted in response to the coronavirus pandemic. Last month in July, an interesting thing happened when MasterCard announced that another company called Trust Stamp will also be incorporated into this Wellness Pass partnership due to its advanced artificial intelligence biometric identity platform. Then it says right at the end, it says, the Wellness Pass is here and it's set for global implementation. Some people ask whether the world will ever return to the old normal under the same conditions as we knew before. Only time will tell. What is clear is that technologies aimed at making the whole world digitised have already been developed and ready for use, and these are knocking at our very own doors, including here in Africa and other developing countries. Now, the fact that the Wellness Pass is attached to MasterCard indicates that, are we going towards a cashless society? Will there be a time when we won't be able to get our own money out? We can just transfer it, pay bills and buy things, but we won't be able to get the cold hard cash like we've been used to. I mean, I think it's a distinct possibility. And this journalist here in Zambia, backs up I back up what he thinks, that the pandemic has been very useful in establishing all these different digital platforms to track our health and our biometrics. So all these things have helped towards the achievement of Goal 3 of Agenda 2030, one of the 17 goals. The only thing I haven't spoken about in this section is the vaccines, and you'll see by the next part how heavily involved the Rockefeller Foundation is with this. Ever wondered why the Rockefeller Foundation never appears on the Forbes rich list? And that's because they're quite clever. They spread their wealth across all different subsections of the company. So there's different branches of the Rockefeller Foundation. They have different names, and I'm going to show you now that they've invested under these different companies in the pharmaceutical companies producing the COVID vaccines. Now, as far as I know, all these shares you're going to see are still active. I read on at the top bit, and it says if there's a red line through it, then they're inactive. So these don't have red lines, so I'm assuming that these are still active shares. 2018, the Rockefeller Financial Services declared $17,000 worth of Astrazeneca shares. In November 2020, the Rockefeller Capital Management had $1 million invested in Sanofi. In 2018, the Rockefeller Financial Services had $90.7 million invested in Novartis. I found a few other pharmaceuticals companies that they had investments in, but I thought I'd stop at 3, it's enough, and these are the main ones. Sustainable use of water is also on the Agenda 2030 goals list, and as you can see here, this is on the United Nations website itself, and it does it for me. It says the pandemic's handy for achieving this goal, and let me read you this. The pandemic offers an opportunity to revive the ocean and start building a sustainable ocean economy. A report by the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific suggests that the temporary shutdown of activities, as well as reduced human mobility and resource demands due to the COVID-19 pandemic, may provide marine environments the much needed breathing space for them to start to recover. And it also says that the oceans are used to carry out rapid testing to detect the presence of COVID-19 by testing their bacteria. And it says the diversity of species found in the ocean offers great promise for pharmaceuticals. So they've said it for me. They've said that, wow, handy virus this is. It's helping us on our journey to achieving all those goals. One of the private water companies used to help them achieve one of their goals, their sustainable goals, is Sanitation and Water for All, SWA. And if you look at their partners, you'll see Unilever's on there in the second column. And I discovered that Unilever is one of the companies that Rockefeller Capital Management has invested in. And they have $4 million worth of shares in that company. This is by no means the only time they've invested in, the Rockefellers have invested in private water companies. There are a lot more, but I thought I'd just show you one, otherwise it gets a bit repetitive because I want to move on to my next point. I noticed three things when I was recently reading through the Agenda 2030 goals and the document as a whole, and that's the fact that they don't mention us as individuals. We're mentioned as a population. There's also no mention of human rights, and thirdly, it's all about women. There's no mention of men. So when I found this article, it's by Green Climate Fund, which is one of the water sources partners. This, to me, looks sexist rather than striving for equality. It says the impacts of climate change affect women and men differently. Women are the hardest hit by dramatic shifts in climate conditions. Women's mortality from climate-related disasters is higher than that of men. Now let's think about this. There's a tidal wave and there's a man and a woman together and they both get hit by a 100-foot wall of water. I'd say they were both likely to die. I wouldn't say that a man was likely to survive any more than a woman was. I think this is really wrong. And overall, I've got this problem with the fact that everything is about feminising society. I don't know if that's the right word, but everything is for women, females. Men have got the raw deal. I think it's becoming equal, and men have been left behind. It says women tend to rely more on natural resources for their livelihood. Any decline in land and biomass productivity affects women more than men. Again, no, I don't agree with that. Especially in rural areas. In urban areas, after climate-related disasters, it is harder for poor women than for poor men to recover their economic status and welfare. I just don't agree with it. Do you agree with this? This document from the Rockefeller Foundation is called Beijing 25, Accelerating Progress for Women and Girls, and it's called 25 because it's come out 25 years after the original one was drawn up. And it reiterates what I said before, that this pandemic is very handy in accelerating their goals. Listen to this. This is right at the beginning. The COVID-19 pandemic has transformed our lives, surfacing severe gender inequalities that many have been trying to address for years. Responding to the scope and severity of the pandemic is straining every system that influences all aspects of daily life. Our public health infrastructure, economy, social and cultural dynamics and politics. Yet COVID-19 also presents an unprecedented opportunity to rethink, reset and build back better, particularly for women and girls. And isn't what this is all about? Building back better. They're going to knock down everything we've got. We're losing pubs and restaurants and small businesses, but they don't care. On our Parliament website, it's even very callously put. It says For all the small businesses that are going to go bust, we're going to build them back. We're going to make green outlets. It's a very handy virus. I can't think of another word to describe it other than handy. And here it is in black and white. I'm going to just zip through the rest of what I had to say. I've got so many notes, but I'm trying to cut them down into just a few sentences. Education, they want equal opportunities and access to education. So I expect that sees the end of private education. Now, when I say I sent my daughter to private school, they think I'm minted. I wasn't. I had to work 3 jobs to put her through. And the reason I chose private education is because they encourage free thinking. They didn't spoon feed her answers. She had to think for herself. And unfortunately, when she left there and went to university, they're spoon fed information. So I don't regret it. I'd do it again. But it's a shame if they they will get rid of private education. I suspect future generations will be taught not so much about academia, but more about the environment, how important it is to be subservient and do as we're told with regards to governments. Maybe I'm going over the top, but I think I'm not too far off the mark. If you look at the involvement that the Rockefeller Foundation has in education, it's quite astounding. I knew they had money in research facilities like the Gates Foundation, but I wasn't aware of just how many universities worldwide they had influence over. I can tell you the top 10. They were the Harvard, CUNY, Columbia, New York, Massachusetts, Stanford, Oxford, Cape Town, MIT and Cornell. And there's also Cambridge and UCL in London, King's College, the Maudsley, which is a psychiatric hospital in Denmark Hill, South East London. The list goes on. I think it will be, as I said at the beginning, indoctrination rather than academic education. The last thing I'm going to talk about is infrastructure. One of the goals is to have equal access to infrastructure, so hospitals, transport, things like that. And one of the ways they can do that is move everybody into the cities, but obviously the cities can't take everybody from the country, so they have to make conurbations, which is expanding the city onto the green belt. Now what this would mean is the farmland would go, agriculture would not be widely available what it is now, and I think they've thought of all this because they can now grow our meat in a lab, which is what they call sustainable. You can even buy patented seeds by Monsanto, so they don't have a plan for greenland from farmland, because I think they're going to put us all into cities so that firstly they can keep an eye on us, and secondly achieve their goal of equal access to infrastructure. Just probably about a third of the information that I'd planned to present to you, but obviously it would be so long, so I've left it at this. I hope you can see what I'm trying to say, that this pandemic came at just the right time. It ticks off so many boxes. It's sped ahead plans that they had in the pipeline to achieve these goals in 2030, and we're only 9 years away now, so they had to get it moving somehow. And I do think too many coincidences make a plan, and I would say this pandemic was definitely a plan.